All right, folks, welcome back. Hour number 3 of the Steve Malzberg Show, Monday edition. And we are joined right now, I'm very happy to say, for the first time by Dana Milbank of the Washington Post. Hello, sir.
Hi.
God, thanks for coming on. I really appreciate it.
Oh, happy to.
You wrote a very interesting piece just right after Thanksgiving and before the weekend about how to save America. And the Milbank plan is, among other things, I should say, to restore the draft. I'm just curious, before we get into it, what's been the reaction that you've gotten from this column?
You know, I've been pleasantly surprised. I sort of figured it would kind of vanish in the holiday weekend and we'd never hear about it again. But I've heard from all kinds of people, from General Stanley McChrystal, and a lot of interest and talk online about it. I don't think anybody thinks it's going to happen anytime soon, if at all. And it was beyond the draft. I was saying, we need mandatory conscription. That means everybody.
Yep.
And that's ideally for military service. But for those who have some problem with military service, some other form of national service, but, a real kind of service.
Well, is this something that Obama has hinted at or talked about during one of the campaigns that he would like to see happen? Not from a legislative point of view yet, but is this something that he had talked about?
Gosh, I don't. If he has, I certainly don't know anything about it. He certainly talked about AmeriCorps and national service in that form, but that's a very small sort of voluntary program.
Now, the reasons, one of the reasons you talk about for doing this is, I guess it's not a quick fix for what you say is wrong with our politics and our political system and Congress and the inability to, as you talk about, get things done, et cetera. But you talk about how such a small percentage of those serving have served in the military,
right.
And we haven't had a president who's served in the military in quite some time. So, George W. Bush aside, with the reserves. So you're looking at at something, if it would start tomorrow, really wouldn't remedy that for many, many, many years anyway, correct?
No, I think we're basically looking at a generation. Tom Brokaw wrote of the greatest generation, and I wonder if people are going to be writing about the worst generation when they're talking about those of us who are around right now. But yeah, the percentage of veterans in Congress was in the late 70s. When you had the sort of the peak because of all the World War II veterans was up around 70%, and now we're down below 20%, which is I think it's no coincidence that overlapped with the period when things really started getting out of hand with our national finances, and also just with the constantly escalating partisanship. I think that what's happened is people started to see each other, Americans started to see each other as the enemy without realizing that, we're all on the same team here. We have disagreements, but we're not enemies.
If there were to be it's kind of a loaded question because I don't see anybody on the left with military experience, especially if it's Hillary's to take if she wants. But under ordinary circumstances, let's put it, would someone's military service at this point, if there were to be someone with a military background running for the presidency, would you, because of the way you write that things are now, would you take a closer, harder look at that person?
Well, I suppose that would weigh to their benefit. At least in the way I look at it. But it doesn't necessarily weigh to their political benefit overall. George W. Bush actually succeeded in making John Kerry's military service a liability.
Right.
We had, I think John McCain benefited a great deal from his military record because it was more than just service. He's a prisoner of war,
Absolutely.
A real hero. So I think that gave him a certain kind of character. And I've actually talked with McCain about this. And he thinks he endorses the whole notion that people have lost this sense of something greater than self-interest, and that in this context we're talking about country and putting country before self. And I think precious few people in either party are doing that today.
Yeah, no, I think we're more polarized, and there are many reasons for it. I think there are many positives to what you say about the mandatory service. On the other hand, when it affects you, I mean, I also have a 14-year-old son who would certainly be affected by that. And when it hits home,
it's easy for me to say now that I'm
right, absolutely. We're talking to Dana Milbank, of course, of the Washington Post here on the Steve Malzberg Show. Can I be honest with you? I admired many columns that you've written because you're unpredictable. I don't think you toed a party line for the most part. But that I think that was evidenced with the piece you wrote about Susan Rice back a year ago, November 16th of 2012, Susan Rice's tarnished resume. And I remember reading that on the air and saying, this is Dana Milbank saying this. Why is the rest of the media, for the most part, silent on what 95% of what's in his column? And all they're repeating is, the optic of two old white men going after Susan Rice isn't good, and ignoring everything that you wrote about her. Why were you like the lone voice out there on I don't want to say on the left, but on the left?
I couldn't have been a lone voice because there was so much opposition to her that she had to.
On the right, though, but I mean, coming from.
Yeah. But I think what was going on there is the Democrats weren't out there criticizing her, but you notice they weren't really defending her either, and I think that's what did her in. If Obama got the sense that Democrats in the Senate were willing to back her up, then he would have pressed ahead. But they weren't willing to back her up. And I think what I was doing basically was giving voice to what a lot of people on the left were saying privately.
And we're talking about go ahead.
So I don't think I was any sort of outlier. I was just I don't
Well, I meant the rest of the media. I mean,
party politics, so I can say what they're actually saying and thinking.
Right. No, and I'm talking about, maybe I expressed myself poorly. I didn't mean that there was nobody else criticizing her, certainly on the right, but I meant in the media. I mean, it wasn't there weren't other articles or columns being written back saying, as Dana Milbank alluded to, she did this, she did that kind. And I don't mean the politicians who aren't defending her, but I mean the media just reporting honestly, because a lot of them had to know what you knew and chose not to write it for whatever reason. Which brings me to one more, Dana, and I'm really glad you're on, and I hope you'll come back. You made some news, I believe it was over the weekend, when you were asked about Martin Bashir and the comments he made about Sarah Palin. And I just want to play a soundbite. This is from Fox News. We have that bite, Adam? Okay. And here it comes.
Yes, and I think the legitimate point that he was making is that these slavery things are brought up too often, and this is how awful slavery is. Then he brought up a vulgar thing at the end for which he apologized. Yeah, that happens on MSNBC. It happens on Fox News. People on this network have talked about decapitating me and turning me into hummus. Nobody's getting suspended or barely even apologizing for that sort of thing.
Was that a host or a guest who
that was a host in your 8 p.m. hour.
Okay, that you were referring to Bill O'Reilly, of course, and I have the transcript of that where he at the end says, but by the way, after he says that about you in a joking manner, he said, by the way, Media Matters, I'm only joking. So even if he didn't say that, do you find it really analogous to what Bashir said about Sarah Palin, to even if he was, joking around or even seriously said, could we behead him? Is that the same?
I do, actually, because it occurred on multiple nights, this thing, and at another point he put up a photograph of my editor and said, let's get an idea of what this guy looks like. Then he said, okay, take the photo down. And he said, have a nice weekend, buddy, which I think is a not so veiled attempt to intimidate through violence. So
really, okay, that's
it went on. It went on, and ultimately he did back down from it, which I think was appropriate. But look, Bill O'Reilly is a professional. He's not the biggest offender out there. I think much more analogous to what we're talking about.
Bashir,
here was the stuff that Glenn Beck was doing, for which there was never any sort of an apology. And he did that for several years.
Dana, I am out of time. Unfortunately, I have a hard break, but I really thank you, and I hope you'll come back, sir.
Absolutely.
All right. Thank you very much. Dana Milbank, ladies and gentlemen, Washington Post. I'm Steve Malzberg. Coming back, Steve Malzberg Show.